Deputy Joan Burton, the Deputy has 10 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I want to congratulate my colleague, Deputy Howlin, on putting together what is a very ambitious but realistic programme of reform. Ireland has a number of crises. Clearly, we have an appalling banking crisis where the losses in the banks have been socialised, whereas in the preceding years, all of the profits in the banks were privatised. Ireland has a crisis in relation to employment and its economy. Ireland has a crisis in relation to its public administration of institutions like the HSE. But more than all of the other crises, and in a way the talisman of the different crises we're suffering from, Ireland has a crisis of reputation. People, whether Irish Americans or Europeans, who once quite openly admired Ireland, now no longer believe very much of what is said. Because from the time that the banking and economic crisis started to unfold 3 years ago, the government, particularly Brian Cowan and Brian Lenihan, repeatedly said, we're turning some corner, everything will be all right, we're out of the difficulty. We have shredded the confidence of international investors and of the bond markets, who are particularly tough in relation to reputational issues, because we are seen to be a country without an adequate system of governance. And as when crises arise, people, when everything is going fine, are prepared to, let's say, take a narrative that this is something to do with the Irish character, our Irish style of life. The Galway tent is funny and enjoyable, and sure, it's a bit of crack. But when the economic situation turns, as it has turned, people take a very hard-nosed attitude to our reputation. And our reputation, quite frankly, is shredded. This ambitious programme of reform would seek to put a clear stamp by a new government, and only a new government can do this, because of all the reputations that are shredded. The reputation of Fianna Fáil is probably more damaged than any other institution in this country. But if you have a new government, you can start again. You can start with an ambitious programme of reform. Today is the 20th anniversary of the election of Mary Robinson as President of Ireland and the first woman President. And one of the factors that marked her successful contest for the office of presidency was that in many ways she spearheaded the hopes of a generation that things in Ireland could be different, that we could open out to the light, that we could end the climate of censorship and repression in the country, and that we could have a much more public governance. And as Deputy Howlin has said, Labour in government the last time introduced a number of key pieces of reforming legislation in relation to freedom of information, in relation to the regulation of elections and the restriction on the fundraising and the amounts of money that could be contributed to politicians during an election, and in relation to a number of other offices. And essentially a new government is going to have to readdress all of these issues. Freedom of information was pretty much closed down, other than for personal requests and for public requests, by a much longer, more tedious, more expensive process. By, a very carefree Charlie McCreevy, who, like his proposals on decentralisation, regarded the gutting of the Freedom of Information Act as two fingers to the people who were so prissy and only cared about standards. And here's one in the eye for you. When I have it, I spend it. And he was delighted to give two fingers to the Labour Party and to voices in civil society who saw and recognised the value of freedom of information. I've done a lot of freedom of information requests in my time, and one of the ones that are among the ones I've done consistently over the last few years, and they are very expensive now. You know, you get charged large amounts of money by the Department of Finance and other departments, has been to get access to the papers and documents surrounding the night of the fatal and fateful bank guarantee. And I've had, you know, success with small amounts of information. But essentially, 3 years into the greatest financial crisis that this country has ever known, we are still no wiser. And I want to say specifically tonight that at the weekend there were a number of remarkable articles in two of our leading newspapers. One in the Irish Independent on Saturday by Bruce Arnold, a very respected journalist who has a long track record in exposing matters of public interest in Ireland, and the other in the Irish Daily Mail by Senan Maloney and Jason O'Toole. And essentially, this is why we need the restoration of freedom of information. Essentially, the Irish Daily Mail article suggests that Sean Fitzpatrick, from late in 2007, the former chairman of the Anglo-Irish Bank, was a member or attached to what is described in this article and in the Bruce Arnold article as a kitchen cabinet which was run by the then Minister for Finance, Mr. Cowan, in the run-up to his expected elevation as the leader of Fianna Fáil. Now, the information here is described as being given by a former very senior figure in Anglo-Irish Bank, clearly somebody who was both a senior director and a senior executive. And I want to read what Bruce Arnold has to say into the record of this House. Cowan knew that the fiscal roof was falling in when, as Finance Minister, he involved himself in the Anglo-Irish Bank crisis, setting up a kitchen cabinet. The same remarks are made in the Irish Daily Mail. And in the Irish Daily Mail, we're told again about the famous dinner that we've all heard of and that features in a number of books that took place in Heritage House in St. Stephen's Green. There was a private dinner with the Taoiseach in April 2008. He was the Taoiseach-elect, as I understand it, at that point. He was the heir to Fianna Fáil. Now, why do we have to rely on an unattributed source in two leading newspapers about the most expensive decision in the history of the Irish state and the connection of that decision to the investment or to the gambling in contracts for difference by Sean Quinn? I recall that when I mentioned Sean Quinn some years ago in this House, I was accused of not wearing the green jersey. And indeed, a former director of another institution has said that the green jersey agenda, which is referred to here, was the essential agenda pursued in relation to the regulator, to the central bank, to the Department of Finance and others who must have been aware and should have been aware that Anglo-Irish Bank was a bust institution. We now have a financial crisis of unprecedented proportion. But unlike almost any other democratic state or state in the European Union, not one banker has been made accountable before the courts of our land, and not one banker has even come in to a Dáil committee to actually, as Fred the Shred did in the UK, at least he had the grace to say sorry to the country for what he had done in terms of his charge of his particular bank. So, how do you expect, and I want to ask Minister Cleary this, how do you expect the international bond markets to believe a word out of the mouths of your government when this information seems to be available all around the world, and when, as it now emerges, various brokerage houses in the United States and in London knew all about the contracts for difference of Sean Quinn, and for that reason, actually, the share price of that bank collapsed on St. Patrick's Day of 2007. The Taoiseach clearly knew then. If we had a Freedom of Information Act, we would have established this a long time ago. We have a Freedom of Information Act which drip feeds information, like the bad news that Fianna Fáil has done all this year about the banks. And the fact that we will not tell the people the truth is damaging not just to the people of Ireland, but it is incredibly financially damaging to Ireland. With a new government, the people deserve to learn the truth, and the proposals put forward by the Labour Party will give the people the right to learning the truth about the calamity that they are paying for.
Thank you.